Welcome, everyone. Happy to have you with us at the Foresight Forum, and we have a guest in the house. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. It's always fun to have, outside perspectives be able to come in and share their thoughts and ideas. So welcome. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we get started. For those of you who are familiar with our process, this is an hour webinar. If we run a little bit short, we'll answer all questions and then shut it off so you can get back to your busy day. But we will stay over if there's a lot of questions and great conversation at the end. It will stay to take care of every single question that comes in. So jump off if you need to, stay on if you're able to, and we'll keep going until we're done.
It's great.
Well, today we've got our conversation is understanding certifications in the design world. And Andrew, our guest today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. So Andrew DeYoung, I am the Vice President of Product and Marketing at Nucraft Furniture, which is located here in Grand Rapids. And my role, I think, is a ton of fun because I get to manage our portfolio of products, new product launches, traditional marketing like website advertising, showrooms, materials, and then now for Nucraft sustainability, which has been a lot of fun, a lot of learning on Nucraft's side, a lot of learning on my side, but been with the company for about 8 years. And very, very blessed to be part of their organization.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Sounds like you're wearing lots of hats.
Yeah, it's all fun, though. It's all fun and creative. It's great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm Wendy Schlett. I'm Managing Director here at Foresight. I know many of you may have seen me in the past, but I navigate a lot of conversations like this with you, Andrew.
Yes.
So yeah. I have a lot of fun doing my job. All right, and Foresight, just a little bit about who we are and how we're connected to this wonderful company and to Andrew as well. We're your partner in environmental health and safety and sustainability and energy management. So consider us an outsourced resource for your, any type of engagement as it relates to energy sustainability or health and safety. We have a lot of clients and our main focus is on manufacturing, which is part of the reason we're connected with Nucraft. And as you can see, we have a host of manufacturers that are listed on the screen here that we support along the way. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about Nucraft?
My favorite subject. Yeah, Nucraft. So Nucraft is 75-year-old, fourth generation owned manufacturer of premium commercial office furniture. We like to think that we're sort of the premier choice in premium office furniture, and we focus on conference tables and credenzas and private office furniture, so like desks and then lecterns and community space products. And we like our differentiator, our secret sauce is really that we have an incredible, I think this is the fun part about Nucraft, but a pretty deep length and depth of material options within our portfolio, highly integrated power, and then we do a lot of custom work as well. So we work with the design community pretty closely to do one-of-one projects, really being able to see a designer's vision come to life. So, we are a manufacturer, but we really do get to dive very, very deep into projects, which makes it a lot of fun. We get connected very deeply with the design community. We have a lot of close connections, which is where a lot of these kind of conversations around certifications come up. So pretty great company based right here in Grand Rapids.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Talking about this, interesting conversation around sustainability certifications in the marketplace.
Yes.
So we like to talk and level set a little bit here. So, a lot of times sustainability, it's a newer concept. And by newer, I mean, in the business realm, less than 20 years old is a newer concept in the business market. So sustainability originated back in the late 80s. And this was a term that was coined out of a UN report that was looking at the global health, both of the economy, of human well-being, of the state of the earth in general. And they came up with this concept around sustainability that talks about, can we develop and produce and manufacture our goods and operate and live within this earth so that not only does our generation have the ability to have this wonderful life, but can future generations have this fantastic life? And a lot of companies in the business realm were like, oh, this is a great concept, but
Uh-huh.
how do we apply it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we employ it? And so one of the, some concepts came out such as the triple bottom line, environmental, social, um, and profit, or people, planet, and profit. It's another term that came out of that. But companies were still trying to navigate, how do we make this actionable? And so within the investment community, they started looking at, how do we assess risk around sustainability? And so they came up with the concept of ESG, or environmental social governance. And this is all about the metrics. What kind of metrics can we track related to risk for companies that are publicly traded, that are trying to address sustainability? And so ESG was coined out of the concept of sustainability. So not exactly the same thing, mainly around metrics. And then the last piece is climate change. We see climate change used interchangeably so many times, and it's really not the same topic. Climate change is one metric within ESG. So another thought is you could maybe have like, forward arrows, like all of these are built within sustainability. And they contribute to sustainability, but they're not interchangeable concepts.
And
So.
I do think that for the general public, the general population, it's interesting that you have does not equal, does not equal, does not equal, because I do think there is still it's very common for somebody to think these are all very interchangeable things, very interchangeable terms. And when you really dive in, you find out how nuanced and complex and different each one of these really can be.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's an interesting way to say sustainability is not exactly ESG, is not exactly climate change. There are interrelationships and tangential thinking here, but I think there's a really good jumping off point to say, I think it's common practice for people to think these are interchangeable things, and they're not.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's such a good point. I mean, the more we can understand some of the nuances, and even like, who is driving some of the efforts around sustainability. And so, that plays into this picture of sustainability doesn't equal ESG, doesn't equal climate change, but where do the drivers then come into play that are driving these different concepts in sustainability? And so we have, policies and mandates. So think of things such as regulation coming out of California. There's a new sustainability regulation around greenhouse gas emissions. There's a regulation coming out of Europe. There's actually lots of regulations coming out of Europe that is driving sustainability globally, whether you're an actual, manufacturer of goods in the EU or a supplier to them. These regulations are hitting. And then investors are driving a lot of this. We mentioned that they're trying to navigate ESG, created the metrics to be able to help companies understand the risk. And so they're driving sustainability and actions through their assessments of risk and rankings. And then lastly, consumers and supply chain, your customers, they're wanting more and more products and goods that they know have less impact to the environment and are, supporting the well-being of humans, in general. And so they're really driving these efforts and guiding sustainability along the way. So there's a unique intersection here as well, and Andrew, I think this is a really interesting place where you kind of sit. We see manufacturers, now that we got this bigger understanding of where investors play and where manufacturers might be sitting in this space between customers, where do manufacturers and the design community sit and that intersection? Because you kind of are bridging two unique industry groups together as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we're all more or less, I like the way that this graphic is set up, that there's sort of this interchangeable, right? Because there are more savvy customers. The manufacturer is really talking in large part to the design community who's talking to the customer. But to find client, where's the pass through of information? And if the customer is looking for something, the design communities in large part going to be looking for something similar. So you talk about drivers, like where are the drivers coming from? And I think it's important for manufacturers to be kind of positioned both and looking at consumer driven needs, wants, what are they trying to do? And how is the design community really going to support that?
Oh,
Because what I always
absolutely.
think about is what are you an expert in? Likely
Mhm.
you are not an expert in anything or in anything. That would be me. No, you're likely you're not an expert in everything, right? So what's the portion that you're good at? What's the piece that you can play in? How do you leverage information or the technical expertise of others so that we can all find some common ground here? Clients looking for something, design firms looking to deliver something, manufacturers are looking to supply something, and it's all kind of the same thing, but it's understanding what your expertise is and being able to look at the design firm and say, what do you need from us?
Mhm.
Design firms looking at client going, what do you need from us? What are you looking to create? And then back through, okay, we can support you this way. Manufacturers going, we'll support you this way. So I love the way that this is built out sort of like interchangeably and not a linear line, because I do think they're all connecting to one another.
Absolutely. I feel like there's a bridge that you just built
Mm,
between the A&D and the customer, and you as the organization are actually the bridge.
yeah, yeah,
Feeding
yeah,
information back
yeah,
and forth
yeah,
between the
yeah,
customer and and everybody can walk back and
yeah.
forth across that. And that feels like a kind of a challenging spot to be in some respects, because you're trying to navigate what is it that the A&D firm needs versus what is it the customer needs, and how do
Mhm.
we align those, and what is the certification that we need to be pursuing. And I love the slide that's on the screen right
There we go.
now,
Yeah.
because it probably feels very overwhelming.
Yes,
when
that's
you first
exactly the
see
word. That's exactly the word. Yeah.
But the interesting piece, I know we've talked about this before, is there's well over 400 different sustainability certifications that are circulating in the world today. Not everyone applies to every industry, but how do you know which one applies to your industry?
Hmm.
And we here at Foresight have started, kind of creating an organizational structure to some of these to try and help companies understand, and begin navigating which one does apply to me in which scenario. So you've got organizations on the left of the screen, left, right, nope, right of the screen.
That side. Everything to that side.
This side of the screen. You've got organizations and organizational type standards such as B certification or ISO 14000. And this is looking at the overall organization. How are we managing as a company? And then there's certifications that really apply to the facilities or the buildings that are being occupied by those organizations, whether that's an office building or whether that's a manufacturing facility. And so there's a host of certifications from LEED to BREEAM to Living Building Challenge. And each of those bring a little bit of nuance, but knowing that, you're taking this group of 300, 400 plus certifications and kind of narrowing it down to, okay, if I'm pursuing a new facility, maybe I only need to decide between 10 versus 400, kind of tries to help narrow and funnel that information down. And then there's an approach around products, because you could be the most sustainable organization out there and producing, products that are toxic to humans, or you could be producing the most sustainable products and you're actually operating your organization very unsustainably. So it takes, a number of different approaches and potentially the pursuit of more than one standard. And how do you know which one applies? So for products, we're looking at, the potential, especially talking to this industry sector around furniture, BIFMA level, indoor air quality, the testing of the products for emissions. We're looking at Green Guard or HPD. These are some of the product certifications that really apply to the host of standard, or there's a host of standards out there that apply to a number of different products. So trying to navigate this space can be really challenging. So when you look at sustainability certifications, how does that feel to you as a
Yeah.
company that's trying to navigate this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So there's there's going to be a lot of personal stories sort of wrapped up into our hour here. And I think it felt daunting the first time, even personally going through and what were all these different things, because it doesn't come to us the questions are not coming to us as a manufacturer very succinctly,
Mhm.
saying we are looking for only products that have LCAs. It was never feeling like it was packaged that way. It was always subsets of, bigger initiatives. And so we were trying to piecemeal sort of the narrative together, and it felt patchy. And we kind of had to take a little bit of might be overselling the situation, but I think we had to take a little bit of a hard stop and say, you go back to drivers, but like, what is the why behind all of these what's of certification? Why are these certifications really driving a lot of the narrative? And so, through the course of having a team that got put together at Nucraft to focus on these things, and my own personal, in some instances, hey, chat GPT, compare and contrast the difference between an EPD and an LCA, in seeing that response and trying to tailor it in a way that my brain could process all of this. Kind of came to this conclusion around why that is, in the way the slide setup is sort of three-pronged, but it's likely four-pronged, and it's the why for the customer. And so let's consider the customer for sake of conversation, the end user. Let's call it like Apple, Nike, Patagonia, whomever. A why for the design community. So architects, interior designers, and we'll put dealers. If you're outside of this industry, dealers are who the manufacturer is selling our product through. And then the third prong, like you see up on the slide, is the why for the manufacturer. And of course, a fourth prong could even go further back and say the supplier of all the manufacturer's pieces of parts. And so I think the why is an interesting place to start before diving into the technical of the what of some of the certifications. And I've come to look at the why for the customer. It's a level of attraction. So I think there's three pieces here as well. So I think there's a level of attraction for retaining top talent, attracting new employees to your organization, because there's an entire generation, Gen Z, starting their first job. They've been in the industry maybe for a couple of years. They may have worked from home a couple of years, pandemic. They know how to work remote. What makes an organization attractive to them? And it's generally, I think it's organizations that share a lot of their own core beliefs and their core values within a space that they've gotten their degree or they want to pursue. And so I think organizations that can like walk their talk and stand behind their core values by saying, yes, we have, our building has passed this certification, or we have pursued products that speak to these specific things. I think that's attractive to that generation specifically, as well as others. But there's also a level of attraction in investment and investors. Again, a level of like walking the talk. You can see how over time these initiatives begin to add up to cost savings.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is very attractive to new investors and investments. And then the third would be an attraction, and you talked about this a little bit, an attraction to their customer. Again, like walking talk. Wendy, I would wager that you have brands that you feel like are very aligned with you personally. Even outside of a sustainability conversation, there's brands that you align with personally. I have them. Those that are in the room with us have them. And I think there are certain brands that really promote a certain image of themselves. And this is certifications end up being a good why for them, because it shows how they are putting into practice the thing that they preach. They're not just greenwashing advertising or the narrative. Like, they can show how they've done the work, because it takes time, resources, and money to achieve these things. I think that's one of the beautiful things of the certification, is it's a level of show and tell, if you will. Like, we've done the work behind some of these things.
I love that. And it layers in a confidence for the customer buying it. And it's just, a validation, a means of validation
absolutely.
of all of the hard work that you're doing to move the needle in a different direction.
So let's take a back step from the customer, if you will, and go to the manufacturer. I think maybe the A&D firm. So what is the why of the certification for the A&D firm? I've come to believe that the certification acts as a level of like vocabulary vehicle to be able to translate the needs of the client. Again, who's the expert in what here? The client has needs. They're trying to broadcast to people that they want to work for them, their customers, new investors. The interior design firm is tasked with programmatically translating that into an actionable plan that can achieve their goals. And certifications for them act as a little bit of a vehicle to be able to do some of that. I think there's also probably a level of differentiation, competitive differentiation, in that firms have the ability to specialize in certain things that align with certain verticals and certain customers. And being able to leverage plans and strategies that focus on certain certifications versus others allows them to really become an expert in a certain area. And it allows them a little differentiation from their own competition to say, we're really good in this area, if that is important to you, clients, right?
Oh my gosh, I feel like that could be huge, especially to be able to tell that story, and be able to relay that information to the A&D firms in the space so that they can then relay that to their customers.
Especially because it's so complex. As I was preparing for this, I kept thinking in the back of my mind that these initiatives are not afternoon projects, right? Over drinks. These things take a lot of work, energy, capital, and so making sure that you're able to execute as the design firm can make you look like, not make you look like, but can make you an expert in certain areas, specifically if brands are looking for something very tailored, and make you attractive to them.
Absolutely.
And so third prong, this is feeling long-winded, but third prong is manufacturer seat. Sorry, that's where I'm at. So why is a certification attractive to, or like, what's the why of the certification for the manufacturer? Well, for us, because Nucraft makes really beautiful furniture. We are good at craft, right? We have honed our craft over time. And to be good partners to the A&D community and help end user clients achieve their goals, we need to be able to support those initiatives along the way of making really beautiful furniture. And so the certification begins to untangle some of the science and the technical. It allows us to say, what are our clients, the interior design community, or the design community, excuse me, what are they looking for? And it allows us to be proactive about looking at how we interact with our suppliers, how we engineer products, how we begin to communicate what is available to the design community. And certification becomes a way to do that for the manufacturer.
And it sounds like it's allowing you to really be that bridge
It is,
between
right?
the customer and the A&D.
Yeah. Because I think it's important to acknowledge that we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to achieve the same goal.
Yeah.
And being able to sort of like sew a thread between the supplier into the manufacturer, into the design community, to the client to achieve their goal, I think it's really important. And having a platform with which to do that, so there's not all these disparate ideas about, well, we need this, we need this, we need this, amounting to what? The certification specifically ends up being a platform to be able to have some of those conversations, which is great.
Absolutely. It's like you're creating your own rug. You're
Yeah, that's exactly a crazy
right,
woven
every time.
tapestry.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Oh, so all of that comes with industry expectations around sustainability.
Yeah.
So what you're describing sounds like it could be complex. At the same time, you're like trying to find something practical to be able to navigate the space. And I'm assuming the A&D world is trying to do the exact same thing. You're in this mediary space of, and so is the A&D firm, trying to navigate what their ultimate customer is trying to do. And so we're seeing, we're monitoring the market at Foresight on behalf of our customers, and we're seeing A&D firms starting to really engage in and around sustainability and starting to define what are some of the sustainability standards that we want to make sure all of our products align to.
Yeah.
And so, we've on the screen, we've identified one particular A&D firm, Gensler, and they've come out with a sustainability standard. Now it's in their second iteration.
Yep.
And they're,
I believe, originally launched in 2024.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I very quickly followed up with a version 2 in 2025, which I think I'm interpreting as their commitment to making sure that this is pushing the industry and evolving in the right ways. So I think that's a very good sign that they're positioning versions so quickly.
Interesting.
It's
I
very
love
great.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really helpful because, and you can see how they're organizing their, I guess, directives, for lack of a better word, around what is it we really want to see all of our products to have, and then how is it that we can drive innovation? How is it that we can drive change in and around this space through what they're defining as market differentiation?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's two different approaches, I guess you could say, for a company to evaluate. And we like to use this more as just an indication of where can you go as a company. Like if you're trying to assess what is the market doing, where is the market going, assessing and understanding the guides or directives that an A&D firm might be putting out there or major customers are putting out there helps you align better as the manufacturer to where you want to position yourself in that space as well.
Yeah.
So just some of the different types of standards and requirements that Gensler has defined as part of the standard. So this is not the market differentiator. This slide here just describes what are the basic requirements we're wanting to see. And so they're focusing it around a number of different buckets that I would call. So you've got organizational commitments. And these can be, developing an action plan. We want to see, action around sustainability and what does that look like? What does that mean they haven't necessarily described or prescribed what that means, but they're just asking companies to begin to define what is an action plan for you around sustainability. And then they're also paying attention to indoor air quality impacts. So this is another bucket that they're paying attention to. And depending on, what the industry is that they're designing for, it could be schools, it could be office buildings, it could be a host of different things. And so there's different standards that address the emissions coming off the chair or the drywall in a particular building. And so, there's some indoor air quality standards that they're defining, such as, the ANSI BIFMA endpoint 7.1. So this is a very specific standard for the office furniture industry around air emissions. And then there's another bucket around life cycle impacts. And this is really getting into the product as well. And like, what is the product made of? And what are the waste generated throughout the entire life cycle from raw material extraction all the way to end use? And that can seem incredible trying to calculate all of that across that spectrum. And so, how do you break that down and how do you define that? If you focus on waste throughout the life cycle, or if you're focusing on, reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions along the product, what does that mean? What are those metrics and how do we define that? And so there's a standard called life cycle assessment that helps you define that, looking at end life options. So how do we reuse the products versus just sending them off to landfill? Are there opportunities for reuse? Are there opportunities for disassembling the product so that the materials can be reused, even if the product itself can't be reused? So a lot of different opportunities in and around life cycle impacts that the A&D firms are willing to, consider and really want companies to evaluate and work towards over time. And then there's material health and transparency. And this really gets into the materials the products are made of. What is the marble on this table, or what is the fabric on this chair? And what are the potential impacts? What are the potential hazards? Is there any toxicity associated with the products in their final form? Based on the materials. And so there's health product declarations, and this is looking at the chemistry of those materials down to what they define as 1,000 parts per million, which is really small. It's a small amount. It's like less than 1% of the materials that they want to be able to identify all of the toxicity associated with it. So these are just the things that are they're trying to make more standard across the industry. And then they give you a market differentiator. And so what does that market differentiation look like? This is for companies who've got all of the first buckets figured out to some extent. And now where can we go from there? So this is giving manufacturers a guide, in essence, whether you're working for Gensler or not, there's opportunity here to be able to use this awareness,
Mhm.
to be able to start creating your own strategy and approach, knowing where the potential industry could be going in the future. And so marketplace differentiation really dives into what does the future look like for companies.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the way that I'm looking at it, is the standard is really a baseline around this is how we have a good partnership in
Mhm.
supplying products and then providing a great built environment for the client. And the differentiator is a place where manufacturers then can be challenged then to go
Yes.
above and beyond. But also to your point, I think it's an indication in right version 1 2024, version 1 2020, or version 2 2025. I think it's an indication of how they're going to hold the industry accountable.
Absolutely.
And so it's great for a manufacturer to see where some logical steps might be for any given brand to begin to put time, energy, resources in taking that step for them that are logical, that match their clients, the designers, and what they're trying to do for their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very well said. And so, when you think about what are some of these market differentiators that they're considering, when you look at organizational commitments, this is getting much more specific around that sustainability action plan.
Mhm.
What are the organizational things that we can do? What are the standards? Going back a few slides when we talked about what are those organizational standards that a company can subscribe to, that's what they're kind of identifying here in this organizational commitments bucket. So aligning with ISO 14000 certification, that's an environmental management system for the organization. Or looking at science-based targets initiative. So this is a standard and an approach to really drive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions across the entire organization and the products. And so, these are really looking at what are those structural within the organization structure, and how do we manage our company? What are those values that we want to align with? And, they're identifying a lot of different certifications along the way. And just for clarification too, on this slide, you'll see some parentheses and a credit number. And just because we want to try and highlight and emphasize that, a lot of office furniture manufacturers pursue a specific standard, which is BIFMA level, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the credits with the credit aligns with that BIFMA level standard. So if you are pursuing BIFMA level and have that particular credit in your strategy, you could be aligning with this organizational commitment that Gensler's describing here. And then some of the other ones are multi-attribute certification. So again, this is where BIFMA level comes into play, specifically for office furniture manufacturers, but there's other ones. So if you happen to be, in building products and you're making drywall for the, or you're making the steel beams that go into a building, living product challenge or cradle to cradle could be other certifications that, Gensler is identifying that any organization could subscribe to, whether you're in office furniture, out of office furniture, but most products go within a building and a A&D firm is designing that building. So they're trying to organize and funnel and align a lot of different types of manufacturers, different types of customers into a space. And then life cycle impacts get a little bit more challenging as well. And so we're talking more about the certification. You mentioned environmental product declarations earlier. So this is a declaration that goes with that life cycle assessment when you're looking at everything from raw material extraction to end use. Then there's a certification aspect to it. A third party comes in and validates all that information to say that you're doing what you say you're doing and you have all the documentation to back that up, and feel really confident when you share that information out in the public that yes, we have done all of our homework and we're moving in this direction that we call sustainability, and this is how through that EPD. And lastly, material health and transparency gets even more challenging as well. And so they're looking at, different types of transparency mechanisms. Again, health product declaration is in there. Again, that 1000 ppm, but this is the actual certification associated with it. But there's also a declare label. There's also cradle to cradle reach, which is actually an EU regulation. And they want companies to, even though it might not be applying to you as a manufacturer here in the United States, maybe you can align with Reach to say, yes, we understand what Reach is saying. And, you know, even though we don't sell product there, our products meet the definition that's being defined in that market. So there's so many different versions, you know, the companies can have just an array of opportunity in and around sustainability and trying to navigate this space. Like I can only imagine, Andrew, like what it was like for, I mean, you as a manufacturer to see something like a Gensler standard come out and say, where do we go? How do we navigate this?
I think that's an interesting point, that Gensler is such a really good example of something that feels both like robust, but also sort of comforting that it's been outlined.
Yeah.
And although Nucraft loves our relationship with Gensler, we have a relationship with many design firms who also have their own initiatives and their strategies. And so I think it's really, really important that you have a good understanding of what your specific clients are looking for. You know, are you in the commercial office space? Are you in healthcare? Are you in education? Are you in more the built environment versus a product manufacturer? Just really being able to align with the different design firms and verticals and clients that you either work with or your clients work with is really helpful in being able to sort of like geolocate where you should land on the subject of what things should you be spending your resources and capital on. And a sort of funny phrase in the next slide here is sort of like, how do you decide, what's the phrasing, who to make happy with your certification choices with so many options to choose, you know, and not all 400 that you talked about in the beginning are applicable to like a Nucraft. There are many that are applicable, and understanding what's going to have the greatest impact so that we can be the best partner that we want to be, or so that you can be the best partner that you want to be, can be a little bit of a challenging task. But I think the thing that I had to wrap my brain around as I was beginning my journey in understanding all of this was the difference between a single attribute and a multi-attribute. That's really how I was able to connect into these certifications and understand where was I going to drive my impact from. And it was Foresight for me, actually, that began to sort of untangle that a little bit, because like I said, there was a lot of at-home chat GPTing, understanding the compare and contrast and what would be good. And but
what would we do without chat?
I know, and it solves so many problems. You know, I think being able to see what it is you're about to talk about, the differences, and being able to show them, I think is really valuable, especially if you're more at an entry level, beginner level, trying to navigate all of this and understand it.
Thanks for that segue.
You're welcome.
You teed me up really well. So let's talk about this difference between single and multi-attribute certifications, and this is a real you know, challenging awareness, I guess, for so many companies in this space. We talk about over 400 different certifications, and now you're trying to narrow it down. You only have so many resources available. I mean, trying to navigate all the documentation for one certification, let alone 5 certifications that customers might be asking for, can be extremely challenging and resource intensive. And so how do we thread the needle like you described? I love that. How do we thread that so that when we're starting to choose different certifications, one is feeding into the next, so that we're not having to reinvent the wheel, we're not creating silos unexpectedly, and that we're really unifying and aligning the entire process and approach along the way. And so if you start at the left-hand side of this screen, this is where a lot of the single attribute certifications start. So a single attribute certification means it's really focused on one thing, or maybe just a small subset of things. And so as an example, FSD certification is something that's very familiar in the office furniture industry. This is related to products that are made with wood of some form. And how is that wood actually, how are the forests that these trees come from, how are they managed? And this is all about a chain of custody process around one specific material in a product. So I think of a table, you've got a tabletop that might be made of wood, but the legs and the, the bolts and different mechanisms to pull this table all together, those aren't actually the pieces that are certified. What's really certified is only that wood top. And so that's where that single attribute certification comes into play. And then you think about something that's maybe a little bit more intense, which is an EPD. Again, an EPD is aligned with that LCA we talked about a little bit earlier. And this is, looking at end of life options, life cycle assessment, manufacturing, the energy management associated with manufacturing. It touches on more attributes along the way. So it's a little bit more of a complex process, a little bit more of a challenge to go after, but it addresses more points that your customer may be looking for, maybe not. Maybe FSC is all your customers demanding, and that's where you start, and that's maybe where you play for a little while. But then maybe there's additional requirements that come over time, as we're seeing with the Gensler market differentiator, and other A&D firms doing the same thing. Like they're starting to ask for more. So how do we thread this all together? So EPD is another one. Declare is another different certification that's, again, a little bit more intense than an FSC. But this, instead of where the environmental product declaration is focused on the impacts associated with how does that product impact the earth as wastes are generated, resources are consumed, Declare has a different focus. Its focus is on the chemistry of those materials. Are those materials toxic, or are they non-toxic for both use, both in how it's manufactured, but also in the use of the material at the end, throughout its life. And so, that has a different focus than an EPD. So you could see that a customer could ask for both a Declare label and a life cycle assessment / EPD and an FSC certified product. So now you're looking at 3 certifications trying to address a customer need. And that's where this concept around multi attribute certifications come into play, which is what you're seeing on the right side of the screen, which is level, living product challenge, and cradle to cradle. And just focusing on BRIFMA level for the moment, because you're office furniture, and I love this, level addresses all of the different things it can. And so a manufacturer can pursue just level and also be able to show and relate that it connects to an EPD, that they have all the documentation. They may not have that certification, but they have all the documentation, and that documentation is actually third-party certified. So it's bigger steps in that direction, but it's all within a single certification versus having 3 separate certifications, 3 separate audits. So there is decisions to be made in this space around what certifications do I choose? Do I start with, the life cycle assessment and then slowly move to BIFMA level? Do I go the other direction? Do I need to go the other direction? Like there's a lot of, business strategy that comes into this space around all these different certifications and attributes of the certifications.
Yeah, I think what's sort of interesting is, as I was sort of piecing this all together, I was not processing originally that many of the single attributes fell underneath a multi-attribute. I was seeing them as separate things. And the closer I got to being able to interweave, initiatives that may speak to something specific, but also can be part of a bigger, longer term strategy. I think that's where the multi-attribute became appealing. Nucraft doesn't have unlimited resources to work on these things. We think it's important. Absolutely, we want to be good partners of the design community, but we want to be good stewards of the resources that we've been given and that we provide. But it wasn't until we sort of started thinking about these things in terms of multi-attribute versus like almost cherry picking thoughts and ideas and things that we were going to pursue that it really began to click for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this slide as well that talks a little bit about some of that connection where BIFMA pulls in the life cycle assessment. It also pulls in the HPD. And there's some interesting threads between an LCA and an HPD even. They might be single attribute certifications, but there is some connections to the data that's being utilized. And one of those points is what we call a bill of materials. So, this is that standard list of all items, materials, weights, that go into any given product. So, you have a chair and you create this list of all of the different components that go into it, broken down to all of its basic materials. That is something that underlies BIFMA, it underlies the LCA, it underlies the HPD. So there can be unification in this space, even sometimes when it seems like there might not be.
Yeah.
So having a good understanding of where your starting point is, and then how to build the system. Don't assume that you just automatically silo that certification. Like, there's a lot of pieces and parts that can be pulled into others if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is maybe a decent segue, considering I teed you up, you can tee me
Yeah,
up.
right.
Thinking that there might be some value in really just walking through Nucraft's journey of where we started, where we are today. And I think it's really important to understand that we do see it as a journey without a finish line. We're going to get better about understanding the materials that we use as an industry, not just Nucraft. We're going to hold ourselves more accountable along the way. There is no we've completed this work, right? It's constantly evolving. So I always say Nucraft is on a journey. We are, maybe ahead of some in their journey, and we are behind some in their journey. But we're all moving in the right direction, and we all have the same intentions. But we thought it might be fun to sort of like talk through how we got to where we are today, and even our relationship with Foresight. So if you'll allow me to take you back a bit, actually, I go back to like, what are we the experts in? We are experts in building really beautifully crafted furniture. And we knew that defining beauty was not just aesthetics. We knew that it had to come with certain qualifications. And so for a time, we were doing more one-off initiatives. We had FSC, we were doing testing for indoor air quality. Our building is LEED certified, but they were sort of interconnected, not connected data points that we could respond to customer requests as they came. And then it felt like we kind of hit a level of tipping point in needing to communicate better the qualifications of our products. And transparently, and truth be told, it felt like we really couldn't keep up in the way that we wanted to. We wanted to respond to all this. We wanted to participate. We wanted to say, yes, 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 we have this. We've tested for this. But as these things are not afternoon projects, we began finding that it was like, okay, to go do this, to respond to this customer request, it's $10,000 for that testing, or it would take a team 3 months to respond to that. And even to be able to say yes, we wouldn't be able to respond that way for potentially weeks or even months. And then missing out on an opportunity to partner on a great project. And so we pulled the team together a number of years ago to begin to outline, okay, what are we hearing? This seems to have picked up, not necessarily overnight, but I feel like the trajectory really came in orders of magnitude, it felt like. And so in an attempt to navigate and be able to respond appropriately, we had to step back and listen and say, what are these things that we're hearing from what would be the design community? And oftentimes it wasn't coming through in an overall certification. It was coming through as a specific data point that they were looking for, which felt like a random constellation of all this information. We had to spend some time sort of going, okay, we've gotten 5 requests for this thing in the last, let's say, 4 weeks. And we've gotten this many for this and this many for this. What is valuable to pursue? Who are we hearing from? Is it all coming from Gensler? Is it all coming from Perkins Will? Is it all coming from, and begin to navigate what are our clients asking us for, right? What are the things that we felt like we couldn't really respond to?
I love that. I
And
mean, that just like resonates so much with how we recommend our customers approach. Listen to your
yeah, stop
customers.
and listen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once we felt like we had begun to have an understanding of what people were actually asking us for,
Mhm.
we began to navigate how does this fit into the greater universe of sustainability certifications, the larger strategies for some of these design firms. Where do all of these things fit?
Mhm.
Um, and so, like I said, a team got pulled together to really begin to some sort of map that out. And we have a specialist internally now that spends a lot of time working on our sustainability initiatives. And we got to a place where we could understand where we wanted to go. We got to a place where we could understand what a 3 to 5 year strategy for Newcraft would look like. And we had to define what the first baby step was going to look like, right?
Yes.
The most important decision, I truly believe, was just deciding we were going to participate. That's the most important decision. We were not going to be a brand that was going to watch from the sidelines. We were going to be invested into it, but we had to figure out what our first baby step was going to look like. And for us, that was an LCA.
Mm-hmm.
So we had just launched a brand new product, which the product design consultant was Gensler.
Okay.
So there was a little bit of alignment with what we've already talked about. And so it was a newly engineered product for us. And it gave us the basis with which to engage on a life cycle assessment, which Wendy went over a little bit earlier. But we knew pretty well out of the gate that there was a lot of science, technical complexity, nuanced detail that was likely beyond our existing capabilities to be able to navigate through all of that. And so I think one of the other really great decisions outside of just starting was understanding that we needed to find the expert in this. We were going to make really great furniture. We were going to find somebody that was going to help us design it in a way that would meet the needs of the design community and the end client. And so we have engaged with Foresight and helped us determine or work through our first LCA, and then had our EPD third-party verified. And that was our baby step. The reason we made that decision is because all these different questions were coming in, felt like they all fell underneath an LCA. Felt like really that's what people were looking for, where it was the LCA and information within the LCA. So that felt like a really good step for Newcraft to take. It was not without time, energy, resources, money, and people. It was a several-month process, but we learned an incredible amount about what it would take to get an LCA, how to engineer product, manufacture, and operationalize product, what to look for in engaging with our suppliers, what were we going to do in communicating the information, what resonated, what made sense, how do we equip our teams to be able to talk about these things when the requests came in.
That's so much.
It really was a lot, which is why I stress the importance of finding a partner that can help sort of Sherpa you through the process, navigate you through the journey of establishing an LCA and getting an EPD. We've since taken other steps. We've continued to pursue LCAs for other products, but we've since taken new steps to say, okay, an LCA is a single attribute. And we felt like looking at Gensler's product sustainability standard and then a few others, that it would make sense specifically to be in the furniture industry to pursue BIFMA level. And so again, we pulled together the team the same way we did before, and we attempted to read through the E3 and understand what was there, what we could do, what we already qualified for, the additional testing that it would take, which sort of revamped our 3 to 5 year strategy of what were the tactical steps we were going to take to be able to participate in BIFA's levels program. So it's been a journey. Like I said, we don't feel like there's a finish line. There will be times where we pursue other, maybe even single attributes that are not maybe part as BIFMA level as things evolve, which I truly believe they will. And then maybe get wrapped back up into a multi-attribute at some point. So there will be evolution to all of this. But I think the big decisions that got made was choosing to be a participant and not watch from the sidelines. We chose to listen. we chose to map the universe, and we chose to engage a partner that could act as experts in this field, so it could allow us to really continue to make beautiful furniture, but redefine the word beautiful beyond aesthetic, but to also mean healthy for the environment, healthy for the people that are going to be using it, and all around great product.
Wow, that's so much learning in that whole process, and what a unique experience that your whole team has been able to go through. You know, starting with that baby step and then taking it bigger. I mean, I feel like this entire conversation just like followed your journey through this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Well, and I think if I was going to speak to the manufacturers maybe that are on this call that are looking to take their first step,
Yeah.
right? I cannot stress highly enough that you're making the right choice to take a first step. That in and of itself is not an easy decision necessarily, because it comes with qualifications. So that is the right first step. But then make sure that you start by actually listening to what your customers are asking you for. Understand, is Gensler asking you for one thing? Is Perkins Will asking? And that relates to me in manufacturing furniture. But what are your customers actually asking you for? Before you go down the road of saying, I've heard this phrase LCA a lot.
Yeah.
I think we should probably do that. Make sure that that makes sense for what you do, the vertical that you play in and what you produce. And that might be true. It was true for Nucraft to take a good first step that way, but make sure that's true. So make sure you're listening and documenting what you're hearing from your clients, and then take that information and see where you fall within the universe of opportunity and avenues that you can take for different certifications or different standards and programs. Like Wendy said, 400. That's a daunting number.
It is a big number, isn't it? It's crazy.
Not all are applicable, but there is a lot. And in thinking through the different ways you can go, it's going to change the way you talk and work with your suppliers. It may force an opportunity to switch suppliers, which is not right. It's going to change the way you think about designing new product, engineering new product, operationalizing and manufacturing new product. It may force changes in how you ship products and how you engage the installation of product or the tear down and take back of product.
Oh, yeah.
All these things that maybe you're not even doing as a brand today, that maybe in the future would be really great opportunities to support the design community and the end user and what they're looking for. But it really is a transformational way to look at business. But highly recommend the listening and figuring out where you are in the universe. But then the last piece, and this is not a sell for Foresight, I truly do believe it, is find somebody that can navigate this with you. Sitting through some of the meetings where we've been pursuing this LCA, onto our third one now, and hearing all the technical requirements and hearing even internal people have conversations, so our engineers with the Foresight team and bantering back and forth and thinking, some of this feels like a language that I'm not even privy to understand. Like there's so much here is understand that really there is a lot of value in finding the expert in that thing to be able to work through that together. So important first step is just deciding to participate is a really big first step.
You know, and if you don't mind me like talking a little bit about, you made a comment really briefly there about the supply chain and, you know, is it a difference of choosing a different supplier? And you made a comment that's not really a good thing. But I think what is good in this space is the communication. Like Gensler's communicating with you, or Perkins and Will is communicating with you, and they're educating you through this process, through these standards. And I think in turn, you're now doing that, you know, the banter back and forth and the language and all of that with, you know, your engineers around the LCA and then the communication that's required within the supply chain around that. I feel like there's a whole thread of education that's happening in and around this, which I think is so important because it is like sustainability can be so big, which is why there's 400 different standards out there. But you know, like trying to funnel that down to, you know, what's important to your customers, what's important to you, and then educating everybody along the way, whether that's internally to your employees or your project teams or your customers or your supply chain is so critical to elevate everybody in this process.
I love that you just said elevate everybody, right? It's the idea that although sometimes it can feel potentially overwhelming the work. It's like the design community is challenging manufacturers to up their game.
Mm-hmm.
The manufacturer then is challenging the suppliers to up their
Yes.
game. And sometimes it works in reverse. The
Yeah.
supplier is upping their game and coming back to the manufacturing saying, we have options here.
Yeah.
How can we work together to, and even we
I
feel it
love
on the industrial designer side, industrial designers coming to Nucraft and saying, we have an opportunity here to work with X material and X process that you don't currently have within your portfolio, but here's all the ways that it would be hyper beneficial, a good portfolio builder for you. And so I think you're right. We're all sort of challenging each other to be better.
Yeah.
And whether that's coming from the supplier side up or coming from the client and designer side down, I think it's all worth evaluating. But the important thing is understanding what will have the most impact with whatever resources, time, people, money that you have, to be the best partner you can be in this ecosystem of all trying to achieve the same thing.
Absolutely. Oh, I
Okay.
love that. That's so true. So these last tips for manufacturers that we have in place, because I think the whole supply chain concept, that could be a whole nother webinar.
That is a webinar to itself.
So we'll have another one maybe in the future on that one. But anyways, tips for manufacturers around this. You laid out, some really beautiful tips for us as a manufacturer to consider as they're navigating.
Yeah. Starting with what your customer is asking from you. Before you jump into anything, make sure that what you're doing matches what your customers are asking of you. Navigating the greater landscape of what's already out there, seeing what they're asking, how does that fit into what's happening in your industry, what certifications you can seeing and translating those two things together, and then and understanding that navigating this is complex, going in eyes wide open and finding a great partner would be my tips.
Oh, I love that. So well summed up. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are actually at our questions and answer. We made it all the way through.
Great. That's awesome.
So I'm going to see, I'm not sure, well, I'm getting out to see what kind of questions there are. I just want to let you know as well that you can join us for our next webinar. So if you do have to jump off, I'm not sure exactly what time it is. We're probably pretty close to time here. So if you do have to jump off, please join us next month for our next webinar on uncovering cost savings on how to optimize utilities and facilities with Mike Trupis and Mitchell Gleason. So it's going to be a great one. Hope you can join us. If you have to jump off, thanks for joining, and we'll catch you next time. For those who can stay on, we've got a few questions here. You ready? All right. Where did my questions go? Okay. Hang on just a second here. All right. It looks like there aren't any questions.
Okay.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get there. All right. Well, with that being said, I guess we'll wrap this up to our thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being in the studio.
It's been a pleasure.
Having this conversation, trying to, continue to advance the conversation. Love it as always.
It's been a ton of fun. You've been a great partner, and I've definitely enjoyed my time. So thank you.
Thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next month.